What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to take a look at HTMX. HTMX allows you to perform AJAX calls and update DOM elements by making use of plain HTML attributes. It expects a response in HTML as opposed to JSON, which is probably what you're used to, and this can help simplify the process of updating the DOM. There's been some recent hype around HTMX, and I was just curious to see how it can work with a few practical examples. Now you need a backend of some sort so you can return the desired HTML from your endpoints. And of course, we'll be making use of Laravel for this. So let's go into the docs here. It's really simple. If you take a look at this example here, we have a few HTML attributes. HX post is the endpoint we want to use. It supports all of the HTTP verbs like get, post, put, patch, and delete. Trigger is the event we're listening for. In this case, click on this button. Target is the element we want to insert the data coming back from the server. So in this case, an element with an ID of parent-div. And swap is how we want to replace that element. So in this case, outer HTML. Other options include inner HTML, before and so on. And I'll show you a few examples of that as well. So how about we grab this? Let's go to our welcome blade. So welcome.blade. Let's get rid of all of this. Let's start from scratch. Let's say HTMX, and we'll paste that button within here. Okay. And we have to install HTMX. So let's go to installing. I'll just do the CDN here, but there's also an option for NPM. But let's just grab this. Let's put it into our head. And I will also defer it. Okay. Let's change our target to message. And let's create that right here. So say div with an ID of message. And our swap is set to outer HTML. So when the HTML comes back from our server, it's just going to replace this entire element, which is fine. Okay, so if we go to our routes file, we can define that clicked endpoint. So this one that we defined right here. But for any non-GET requests, Laravel makes use of a CSRF token, so we have to pass that in as well. And if we were using a form here, we could pass that in as well. But since I just have a button, I want to bypass that CSRF check. So I'm just going to define our route in routes API, because this does not have the CSRF check middleware. So we'll add that clicked endpoint. So route post / clicked. And remember, the endpoint is going to be /API / clicked if we define it in this file. And how about we just return something here? And again, if you're working with AJAX, you might be used to returning JSON here. But with HTMX, we want to return plain HTML. So for now, let's just do it in a string, and that should be fine. Let's say clicked. Close out that div. Let's save this. Let's go back to our welcome blade. And let's change this endpoint to /API / clicked. So let me save this. Let's go into our application in the browser. Let me refresh this. And hopefully our AJAX call should work. Actually, let me open up DevTools here. The network tab is opened, so we can see that request happen. Let's click the button, and you can see it did work up here. You can see the request here, and you can see the response right here. Again, it's just HTML that we're responding with. Let's go back to our routes file here. You probably want to write your markup in Blade. That should work fine. So let's return a view instead. Say return view. This can be any view. It can even be a Blade component. Let's just say test. So we'll make that file right here in our resources views folder. Test.blade.php. Let's just make this a div. Say I was clicked. We can even pass data into here if you like. So we'll pass in a variable called foo, and let's pass that in from here, just like we're used to. So say foo bar. Okay. So now this should work the same way. If I refresh this, click the button, it does work with a Blade view instead. You can even easily add a loading indicator. So let me show you how to do that. Back to our welcome blade. How about right here? Let me just make a span with a class of HTMX indicator. And we'll also give that an ID of indicator. Okay. And let's say loading. And you can put whatever you like in here, for example, an SVG spinner, but this should be okay for now. And within here, we can say HX indicator equals what we just created here. So in this case, indicator. And how about I put a sleep on here to simulate some lag. Sleep 2. And now we should have that loading indicator. So if I refresh and hit click me, there's the loading indicator. And there is our response. So yeah, super simple to make AJAX calls, all done through HTML attributes. Okay, now let's take a look at a few examples I have prepared here. So I have one prepared at contact. Let me just hide DevTools here. And if you scroll down, you can see we have a typical contact form here. And it does work, but it's just a typical response with a full page refresh. So I believe if I enter my name here or my email, this is my message. It should work, but it's going to do a full page refresh and scroll back to the top. So it's not an AJAX call. So that did work. There's the success message, and the email should have been sent out. But again, that's not the best experience because, again, it's a full page refresh and it scrolls to the top. So for example, if I had errors here, it scrolls to the top and then we have to scroll back down to see the errors. So it would be better if we had some sort of AJAX call so we don't do a full page refresh. So let's go ahead and convert this page to make use of HTMX. So let me just show you the code for this. It's my routes web. We have /contact. That's just a view. And this is the post request that has some validation. Here's the mail actually being sent. And then we just return back with the success message. And for the blade file, it's contact blade PHP. Let's make sure to import HTMX as well. So we'll grab that from here. Let's grab this. And let's paste that in here. Okay. So let's go ahead and convert the form to make use of HTMX. So let's look for that form right here. Let me just reformat this. And let's go ahead and add our HX attributes. So if you have HX attributes, it's going to ignore the default. So we can just leave these 3 here. Let's make a post request. The slash, again, we'll stick with the API routes, but you can pass in the CSRF token as well. And that should work in the routes web if you want to do it that way. But like I said, I'll stick to /API/contact. Okay, let's add an HX target. So what element do we want to replace? We'll make an element with an ID of response. So this will be where our success or error message goes. HX swap. In this case, inner HTML or outer HTML should work fine. I'll stick with inner HTML because that's what I have in my example app I'm referring to. And now let's create this element here. So a div with an ID of response. I'll put it right here. So response. Okay, let's save that. And let's take a look at our current endpoint. So all of this. And we'll move this to our routes API. Okay, so we'll put it down here. Make sure to import mail and our mailable, which is not really important in this example. And if you're curious, the mail does get sent out and it's currently set to the log driver. So you can see the mail being sent out here. Let me just delete that for now. And we'll work on validation in a second. But let's see if we can get the success message and the actual email sending out. So assuming validation passes, the only thing we have to change is this line right here. So instead of redirecting back, we need to return a view with the success message. How about we do that? So say return view, let's say contact success. Okay. And let's go ahead and create that. Let me just duplicate this one we had earlier for test. Duplicate contact success .blade.php. And I believe I have a snippet here for a success message. I believe it's this one here. So we don't need the session variable or the check for it. So let me remove that. We can just put the message directly in here. So say message was sent successfully. Okay. And how about I put a margin bottom here? Let me save that. And let's go back to our contact blade, just so you can see what's going on. So we're going to make a request to /API/contact. It's a post request. Again, assuming validation passes, it's going to send a mail and then return this view, contact success. This is just our success message styled with a green background. And that is going to replace our HX target, which is a div with an ID of response right here. The swap is set to inner HTML. So within here, it's going to inject this. So let's see if this works. Let me just undo this. Did I not save contact success? Save that. Okay. And let's give that a try. Let me hard refresh this. Let me just put in an email here. This is a message. And let's try this out. And that didn't work. If you take a look at the network tab, you can see contact success not found. And that's because I did not spell it right, of course. Okay, let's give that one more try. Let's hard refresh. Email, message here. Let me just close DevTools for now. Send message. And you can see we do get that success message. And the email should have been sent out. Just to double check the email, let's go into our Laravel log. And there's the email. Now, what about our validation error messages? So if I just refresh this and hit send message, you can see something happened here, but we don't get any validation messages. So let's fix that. Actually, you can see we have two contact forms now. And let me try to explain why that's happening. So the validation is failing. So let's go back to our routes API. So right here, it's failing. And it's not expecting JSON. So Laravel responds in the typical way. And that's just the HTML for the entire page with the errors on it. But we don't want that. We want to return our own view with just the errors. So similar to what we have here, but for our errors. So we have to make one small change here, and that's to make use of the validator manually. So let's comment this out. Let's say validator equals validator make. Let's pass in request all and our validation rules in here. So it's the same thing as this. Let's paste that in. Let's uncomment that. Let's make sure to save. Let's import validator. Okay. And now we can check if the validation fails with validator fails. So if validator fails, then we can return a view with the errors. So similar to this, we'll make a new view called contact error. Let's paste that in, but we'll also pass in all of the errors. So errors is validator errors. Okay. So let's duplicate this contact success, but now contact error, blade PHP. Okay. And again, I have a snippet here for errors. I believe it's called validation errors or error validation. And we don't need to count the errors here because we already know there are errors. So we can get rid of this if. And we are passing in this error bag, and we're using for each to go over them and then displaying them in this list item. So this should work. Let me save this. And now hopefully our errors should show for validation. Let me hard refresh. Let me send message. And message sent successfully. That's wrong. And that's because I forgot to change this to contact error. Save that. Try that one more time. Send message. And there are our error messages. So again, we're performing AJAX calls here, but we are not using any JavaScript. We're just making use of HTML attributes and then returning the desired HTML to be replaced into our DOM. So one more case I want to fix here. That's when we have a success message here. Send message. Okay, we get this. But I want to clear out the form here. And I'm not really sure if there's some sort of event you can hook into and maybe perform some light JavaScript, in this case to clear out the form inputs. But the solution I had for this is to just replace these elements as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So only for the success case, because when there's an error, we want the input to stay there. For our contact success, we're replacing this div with this, but we also want to replace our inputs and just clear them out. So these inputs right here. So this and the text area. And we already have IDs on them. So we have ID message and ID email. So we can target these as well in the contact success. So right here, actually, let me grab the entire input here. So let's copy this, go into contact success. So this is being injected into our HTML like you saw, but we also want to inject this when it's successful. So it's going to look for the same ID, but we have to add one more attribute here. And that is HX swap OOB. So out of band equals true. So it's going to see this as well. It's going to see this attribute. It's going to look for this ID of email and then swap this in the contact form. And that should clear out the input. Again, that's kind of overkill. Not sure if there's a better way to do it. You can make use of blade components to dry up the code and not have repeated code, but let's just see if this works. Let's do the same for our text area. So I will grab this. Let's put this in here. Let's grab this attribute. Let's paste that in. And let's see if the input gets cleared out after a success. Message here. Send message. And it does clear out the input. Okay, let's take a look at another example here at /users. It's almost the same thing as our contact form, but we also have this list of users that we want to update as we add new ones here. So if I add one here, create user. Again, this is without any AJAX. So it does a full page refresh and scrolls back to the top, but it does work. So you can see that new user here. But we want to make use of AJAX and HTMX for this. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, basically the same thing, but we have to update this list of users. So let's start with the validation in this case. It's users.blade.php. Oh, and the code, if you want to see it, it's in our routes web. Again, basically the same thing. Here's the view. We're passing in all of the users. And here's the post request. We have some validation, and we are just creating a new user here and redirecting back. Okay, so let's grab this endpoint because we're going to put it in our routes API. Again, it can work in here as well if you pass in the CSRF token, but since we're already doing everything in routes API, I'll just put it there. So let me paste that in here. Let's start with the validation. Let me import this first. And it's the same thing as this. Let's grab all of this actually. And let's just replace our validation rules with what we have here. Okay, paste this in here. Let's comment this out. Let me just delete that since you already have it in routes web. Let's change this to users error. We'll create that. Let's make sure to import hash. And we will take care of this case in a second. Let's duplicate contact error and name it users error. And this will actually be the same thing, so we can reuse the other one as well, but I'll just stick to using this file. Okay, let me save this. Let's go to our users blade PHP, and let's update our form as well. And it's basically the same as what we had for the other form. Let me just reformat this. So HX post is going to be /API/users. HX target, we'll make this in a second. Same thing. Div with an ID of response, and HX swap inner HTML. Okay, and I already have that right here actually. So let's see if our validation messages work. Save that back here. Let's refresh. Let's hit create user. And that's still doing a full page refresh because I forgot to import the script for HTMX. So let's grab the one from contact up here. Make sure to grab this as well and put it into our users blade. So up here, okay. Save that, hard refresh, try one more time, and it does work. Okay, now let's work on the success case. So again, almost the same, but we have to make sure to update the list of users. So let's go into our route. Let's grab what we have up here, but we'll make a new view for this. So let's put it right here. Let's say users success. Let's duplicate contact success. It's named users success. Okay. Let's change the username here. User was, or the user success message created successfully. And we do want to clear the input, so we can do the same trick here. Again, this code is duplicated, but you can make use of blade components if you like. So let's grab the name input from users blade. Look for input here for this one. Grab that, put that in here. Make sure to add the HX swap OOB equals true. And same for the other field. So let me remove this. Let's grab our other input. So this one right here for email. And that should work as well. Let's grab this. Let's paste that in here. Save that. And that should work. But it's not going to update this list. But let's just see if it works for now with the success message. Let's say another another@another.com, create user. Okay, so we do get the message. The list is not updated, but if I refresh it manually, you can see that person there. Okay, how do we add the person we just created into this list here? So back here, we can do the same trick to update another element. So what we want to do, if we go back to our users blade, we have that unordered list of users right here. Let's actually add an ID on this. Say users. And after we add one, we want to update this list and add a new list item for the user we just created. So we added this ID of users. Let's go back into our, let me save that first actually. Go back into our user success. Let's add another element in here. So we want to add another list item. So I tried just adding the list item in here. So we need the user. So we need user name and user email like this. And we have to add this HX swap OOB on this element as well. But we're not going to set it to true. We're going to set it to before end and the element we want to insert it into, so users. Now, I thought this would work, but it didn't, and I might be doing something wrong here, but to get it to work, you have to wrap it in a parent div. So let me cut this out. Let's wrap all of this in a div, and let's put that attribute on this div. Okay, so now it's actually just going to add this to the end of the list of our users, which is what we want. So now, hopefully I did everything correctly. Let's add a new person in here, add their email, and hopefully Elon gets added to this list here after I hit create. And we're getting an error because I'm not passing in the user here. So you can see I'm making use of user name and user email. I forgot to pass it in to our success blade. So let's say user is the newly created user, which we will grab from this create. So user is this, and hopefully that should work now. Let me just remove Elon from here and try again. Delete, try again, hard refresh. Okay, let's try adding Elon again. Elon@musk.com, create user. And you can see we do get the success message and our list is updated as well. Cool. And there are different options for replacing the DOM. In our case, we just added it to the end of the list. If you want, you can replace the whole list of users as well. Or if you want, there's also an option for using something like morph DOM. So it only replaces new content instead of replacing the whole thing. Okay, let's take a look at one final example here, and that is this search filter. So as we type here, we want to filter this table and only show results for whatever you typed. So I just have the UI in place for this. It's not currently doing anything. So if you take a look at our blade view, so it should be search.blade.php. We have our table here. Here's our input, and we have this table here. So we want to replace this entire table as the user types. So this would be a good example to extract to some sort of blade component. How about we grab all of this? Let's cut this out. Let's make a new blade component named, how about table users? And we want to pass in the users. So say users equals users. Okay, close that out. Let's go ahead and add that here. Let's make a new file. Let's put it within components. Table users.blade.php. Okay, let's paste that in. And that should work, hopefully. Let me save this as well. Let's refresh this, and it still works. But now we have it in a blade component, and we are going to be updating the users here, again, based on what the user searches for, and based on a query that we will formulate. So again, let me just reformat this input, and let's add our HTMX attributes in here. So let's say HX, let's make it a post request. I'm not going to do all of the fancy stuff like have query strings in here. I just want to keep it simple and get it working. So let's say HX post. The endpoint will be /API/search. We have our trigger, and we'll do that in a second. Let's just add our target first. And this will be table users. Actually, that should be an ID. And we have to give our component an ID. So we will right here, table ID equals table users. Okay, save that. Let's go back to our search. And let's add our trigger. So our trigger is going to be on key up. We also want to say changed. So only update if something in the input actually changes. So it won't be triggered for things like just pressing the shift button. We can also delay. So this will be like a debounce. So requests won't be sent until the user stops typing for a certain amount of time. Let's say delay about 500 milliseconds. We also have to say search here, comma search. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what that does, but we are using an input type search here, and you can clear it by hitting X here. And when you add search here, it makes it so it updates when you hit that X. Okay, so let's work on the endpoint. So routes API. We want to make another post request here called search. Okay, and we want the request in here. So this is whatever the user types in. You have to make sure to import request. And let's go ahead and make use of Eloquent here. So say users equals user query, and let's search for name for now. Then we'll add email as well. Name, like, and how about we add a wildcard in here? So we'll say %, and request search. So whatever the user types in. And let's make sure to close that out with a wildcard as well. And we'll add email after we get it working. So let's just say get for now. And we can return a view here, return view. And we just want to return the table with the updated users. And we already extracted a blade component for that. So we can just use that. So components dot table users. And we can pass in our updated users here. So users is users. Okay. Hopefully I did this correctly. And hopefully our search should work. Let's hard refresh. Let's look for me here. And of course it doesn't work. And again, I forgot to import the CDN link for like the third time. So let me just do that quickly. So let me paste that in here. Save that. Hard refresh. Let's try searching for me. And it's still not working. We're getting post method is not supported for API search. And that's because I have a get request, should be post. Or get should work as well if I just change it in here. So AJAX post, but I'll just stick to post here. Let's try searching for my name here. Doesn't seem to be updating still. It might not have the request here. So if I go back to search blade, if I look for my input, yeah, this needs a name on it. If it doesn't have a name on it, it's not going to pass it into the backend, similar to a typical backend form. So let's say name equals search, and hopefully this should fix it. Hard refresh, search for me, and now it works. Awesome. Let's try the X button here. Okay, does work. And currently it's not searching for email, but we can easily fix that. Okay, so let's update our query. So we have an or where clause. So back here, we can just say or where email like request search. So now it should search for email as well. Hard refresh, let's look for this email. And that does work as well. Cool. So there you have it, guys, a few examples of using HTMX with Laravel. Its simple approach to performing AJAX calls with only HTML attributes is definitely interesting and can be useful in certain cases. Now, if you're wondering if I think this could replace something like Livewire, generally speaking, I'm going to say no. Livewire has so many amazing features, especially with the latest version that was just released, and it can easily be the backbone of your entire app stack. However, as you've seen in the examples in this video, if you just have a simple AJAX call that you want to perform and update a simple DOM element on your page, then HTMX might be a good fit. So yeah, definitely give HTMX a try.